Hello everyone, welcome to the Point Park Athletics YouTube page. This is a special program for the NAIA Division II Women's Basketball National Tournament. Of course, the Point Park Pioneers back in Sioux City, Iowa for the tournament this week for the second straight year. My name is Kevin Taylor, Director of Athletic Communications. I'm joined here by Zac Weiss, who covers Point Park women's basketball for a number of publications here on campus, the Globe campus newspaper, as well as the Pittsburgh Sports Report and the Pittsburgh Sporting News. Zac, thanks for being with us here today.
Absolutely glad to be here, Kevin.
Zac and I are going to break down the entire NAIA Division II women's basketball tournament, look at some of the matchups specifically with the first round opponent. But before we do that, we're going to take a look at how they got there, specifically the Point Park Pioneers coming in at 25-6 overall, 11-4 in the KIAC. Point Park, the champions of the KIAC tournament. Of course, they got there last year to the national tournament as AMC conference champs. Of course, the AMC disbanded over the summertime, but Point Park, a new conference, the KIAC, they were 11-4 in the league. To win the regular season championship and take the #1 seed, they went 3-0 through the tournament to win the KIAC automatic bid. Point Park is still just outside the NAIA Division II top 25 poll, number 28 overall, and in the others receiving votes category, the Pioneers took a #8 seed in the 32-team tournament going on this week, and they will play a #1 seed, Indiana Wesleyan, champions, regular season champions of the Crossroads League. Indiana Wesleyan 30-3 overall, 16-2 in the Crossroads League. They are ranked #4 in the final poll, and they took one of the 4 #1 seeds, a tournament regular, the Wildcats of Indiana Wesleyan. Point Park, #8 seed versus #1 IWU. That'll be Thursday night, March 7th, 7 p.m. Central Time from Sioux City, Iowa, Tyson Events Center. Of course, that's 8 p.m. Eastern Time. There'll be live video courtesy of the NAIA streaming online pay-per-view, or you can listen free on WPPJ AM 670 and MSASports.net. That takes care of how they got there, and we're now going to switch it over and talk to Zac about breaking down Point Park and specifically the matchup with Indiana Wesleyan and the tournament as a whole. So Zac, first off, tell us about this Point Park team in the national tournament for a second straight year. It was a long season. They won the KIAC right where they want to be. How did they do it? How did they get there?
The Pioneers have really embraced the role of an underdog. You're looking at the rate that here, they're a top 10 defense. Defense wins championships. That's really been the motto of head coach Tony Grenick. You've seen it time and time again, and you really see them rise to the occasion. 56 points is the average points amount that they give up on defense, which is a tremendous amount, and really supports Coach Grenick's theme. Hold them under 30 in the first half, hold them under 60 for the game, and you're golden, you've got the W. And you've seen that time and time again, and you've seen that against a lot of tough opponents. And you see that again, and you've seen it again and again, and they really rose to the occasion in the KIAC tournament. And you see the offense finally starting to click at the right time. Come tournament time, the offense really woke up, and they were sputtering after that Damon game, and they finally woke up. And that's been a huge reason why they're at where they're at now.
Absolutely. Certainly a team that's built on defense, but we saw that offense come together in the KIAC tournament. Hopefully they could keep that going at nationals. Now, Zac, you covered the KIAC tournament Final Four out there in New Albany, Indiana. You were there in the gym when that final buzzer sounded and they qualified for nationals, and you talked to the players. What were they saying? What was the reaction and their satisfaction level with getting back to the national tournament after a long year where that was their goal to get back?
It's a huge excitement factor. Anytime you win a championship, it's always very exciting, whether you've won it time and time again, such as what the IU Southeast ladies were able to accomplish for 4 straight years. But for the Point Park women, this was their first year in the KIAC, and that brings a lot of uncharted waters, a lot of uncertainty. And when you're picked to finish 3rd in the preseason poll going in, you're expected to finish outside the top 25 after a great appearance in the NAIA National Tournament last season. You've got that chip on your shoulder. And the Pioneers really have been out to prove people that, hey, we're still a force to be reckoned with, and we're still here. And they showed their pulse time and time again throughout the season, and they found their identity and played as a team more and more and trusted each other as the season progressed. And you see the end result as a trip to the national tournament. You see what happens in the finals. They were leaping into each other's arms. They were excited. It's a sigh of relief because really the Raiders have really denied them all season of that berth in the top 25 that they have so well deserved, and I'm sure we'll touch on later. But you're looking at the fact that this is a team that had a lot to prove, and when their backs were up against the wall, time and time again they came through.
And of course, last year getting there for the first time, 23-7, the best season to date in program history. Of course, they're back there again, even more wins this year. A first-round loss at last year's national tournament to then number 10 Corbin of Oregon. 60-58 Pioneers lost in kind of disappointing fashion. Missed a layup at the buzzer, so they had all year to think about that and work towards getting back here as a goal. And hey, they've done it. And like you say, would like to maybe have a little bit more respect in the poll because they end up with the number 8 seed, and they have to take on number 1 Indiana Wesleyan, a tournament regular. Zach, you were there for the selection show. The team had a little gathering here on campus. What was the reaction of the players when they saw their name on the number 8 line, and then really the poll, number 28 overall, even with the tournament title?
Well, to be honest, it's almost a slap in the face that KIAC is in as a whole. You have 4 teams, maybe 5 teams that really were tough and battle-tested, and obviously with conferences you'll have tough teams, you'll have those middle teams, and you'll have those teams that are kind of down lower. But I really think that because maybe 1 or 2 of those teams that are down lower, the KIAC perhaps got a little bit of a slight. They were the only conference not to be ranked in the top 25 at any point in the season, and I know that there's been some something along the lines of, hey, why not us? And that's really the main theme right now. Why not us? Yes, there is some disappointment expressed over the seeding, but when they did see the 8, it still is a joy to see yourself in that spot. I know the players, I talked to Maeve Gallagher afterwards, and she said, it's almost a slap in the face. It's very disrespectful that, hey, we still are in the top 25. We just battled through a tournament. We just beat a tournament regular. We just beat a team that contained the 2nd leading scorer in the NAIA in Trinia Barbie, and yet here we are. We moved up 1 spot to 28, and we face a juggernaut right away in the number 1 seed, Indiana Wesleyan, a number 4 seed, number 4 ranked overall. And it is a slap in the face, but Coach Grenick was like, okay, we've got this. Come on, why not us? We know this team. We know this team's very defensively oriented. We just got to do what we need to do on defense. And if we keep shooting like we do on offense, why not us? If we get this win, we're in control of the seedings, and that was the attitude.
Of course, the main thing is to be in the tournament, and they nearly pulled a top 10 upset last year, and this is what you want to do. You want to see what you can do against some of the NAIA's best, and of course, Indiana Wesleyan was number 1 for much of the year before dropping down to number 4 here in the final poll. That's because they lost the conference tournament final to then number 4 St. Francis, 54-48 in their final game. So we'll see what a team that was ranked number 1 all year has to do against the Point Park Pioneers, which brings us right into a breakdown of Indiana Wesleyan. Zach, I know you've been looking at a little bit of their video, researching the team. Indiana Wesleyan, what do they do well? What kind of team do they have?
Indiana Wesleyan is a very, very disciplined, methodical team, especially on the offensive side. They're not going to make a foolish decision. You look at the statistics offensively, and I believe it is 5th in field goal percentage. So that right there says that they're a very mature team that shows, hey, we're going to pass up until we get that shot that we know that we can hit. And if you do that, that's often a recipe for success. And it frustrates a lot of defenses because they move the ball from right to left, and they really keep the ball moving. You see that on the defensive side, they're the top defense in the league. They hold opponents, I believe, field goal wise, if I look correctly, yes, their rebounding defense is first as well, and they also hold 6th in turnover margin, so they make sure that they don't make too many mistakes. I believe the margin is 6.5 positive on their side, and that's huge. Pioneer defense, I know, has been going to the lab and really working on what they can bring to the table to try to confuse them, and I know that there have been, I'm sure right now they're on the court working on what can we do right now to try to beat this team, because this team is a very, very tough team. You have their center is a big piece in senior Paige Smith, who averages 16.1 points per game, and you also look at 6.6 rebounds per game. She has a big post move where she'll turn and she'll have that right-handed hook, and that's a huge shot that goes for her. And this team, the offense usually runs through her, but they've also got some threats as well that really challenge and will throw Point Park off. But the main thing is they're very disciplined. On defense, they will not go for the shot fakes. On offense, they'll try to shot fake you and go in any way they can. Point Park's job will be not to fall for those shot fakes, stay in defenses, try to maybe get a couple double teams on on that big and center. And if you get that, then you're putting yourself in a winning position.
Would you say it's a very similar team to Point Park, or a team that Coach Grenick and the Pioneers want to mold themselves after, or maybe try to be someday? Because Indiana Wesleyan has taken being solid and playing tough defense and just being real consistent all the way to the top of the rankings, the top of NAIA Division II women's basketball. Is that a team that kind of Point Park would like to see itself aspire to be, would you say?
I would say that that's a team that they definitely mirror a lot. Obviously, rankings are a little bit different, and that's out of your hands. But this is a team that Point Park, I think, really has looked at and they're familiar with, and they recognize the success in that all the tournament appearances, 2007 NAIA tournament champions, that's another important statistic. And obviously, Point Park's becoming like them because now they're becoming an NAIA tournament regular. Last year, they were kind of getting their feet wet. They were uncertain of what to do. But now this is their second straight appearance and second appearance overall, and that's huge. I mean, Indiana Wesleyan, their defense is tough. Point Park also is a top 10 defense. You have their big as their leading scorer. Point Park's big, and Jania McFadder's is Point Park's leading scorer, and that's absolutely huge. The comparisons are very similar, and I think this will be it'll be a defensive struggle, but it'll come down to whose offense will be ready for the moment more, Indiana Wesleyan's or Point Park's.
Now, you touched on this a little bit, with it being Indiana Wesleyan, #1 defense scoring-wise in the country, Point Park 10. Interesting note is last year it was Indiana Wesleyan 1, Point Park 2, so we know Point Park is capable of being at that level defensively. But with these being two opposing forces, just kind of butting heads, the two defenses, it's kind of like they don't directly go against each other, the two defenses. It's offense versus defense and defense versus offense. So how does that shake out when it's two opposing strengths, opposing forces like that aren't necessarily going up against each other, the defenses? Does it come down to the efficiency offensively, or?
I think it comes down to the game speed. Indiana Wesleyan, as I touched on earlier, runs a little bit of a slower, more methodical offense where they're trying to get that one shot and swing the ball around to get to that one shot. Point Park, I think, is more flexible with the way that they're able to handle the offense from an aspect of speed, and I think that makes them a very dangerous team for Indiana Wesleyan. There's actually a common opponent, Indiana Wesleyan. I believe it was December 7th, I believe. It was December the 1st, actually. They faced Mount Vernon Nazarene for the first time out of 3 times, and Mount Vernon Nazarene's a familiar opponent to the schedule. Point Park defeated them twice, and Mount Vernon Nazarene did give them a fight. They only lost by 7, 57-50. So this is a team that Point Park kind of has some intel on, considering they have a mutual opponent, so there is some little basis to go off of there, and I'm sure that considering the low scores, the lower the score, it might be a little bit more comfortable for Indiana Wesleyan, but if Point Park can get it up to more of a score like what they had against IU Southeast, or even Asbury, a team that gave up a little bit more points than I'm sure they wanted, then I think it's advantage Point Park. So it really comes down to how fast the offense goes, because the offense translates into defense and from a momentum perspective. So if Point Park can speed the game up a little bit more to their liking, then that is absolutely huge.
Now, looking at some matchups, Zach, you mentioned Paige Smith, the forward for IWU that they want to get the ball to as much as possible. Her, or maybe mention a couple others that are there players that Point Park needs to worry about, and on the other side, who has to have a big game for Point Park, looking at the matchups?
Well, I believe Coach Grenick, from what he's doing from the system, the key will be to worry about Smith. She's a huge force inside, and obviously she'll have a little bit of a height advantage probably over Jania McFadder. So Jania McFadder just has to play her game and frustrate offensively. Because there's a little bit of a size misadvantage, McFadder might have to be a little bit more of a presence from the three-point line. So that'll be absolutely huge. I know another storyline for Point Park is, obviously we know what happened, unfortunately, the last tournament game, not just the loss, but the loss of Emily Shartner after the first half due to concussion issues, and that was huge. Her three-point shooting and her defense, it was sorely missed in the second half of that game, and it very well could have been a different game had she stayed. And I think if she can make it through this game, they will be in this game for the full duration of the 40 minutes, if not more, if it goes to an overtime period. Those are huge. Their three-point shooting is probably not as the best three-point shooting, and they'll probably try to double Smith and give them the lower percentage shot, and if they hit those, then you give it to them, but those three-point shots could make a difference for them. For us, obviously, we spread the ball around. Point Park has 4 10-plus point scorers, with Katrisa Savitsky averaging 8.5, and probably the best, her and Teresa Davis being the 2 best defenders on the team. So if they can defend and they can play a Syracuse, as Coach Grenick likes to call it, where they trap and they try to apply pressure to Paige Smith, that would be a key. Just get the ball in the basket. That's the main thing for Point Park, because we've seen, both you and I and Pioneer fans who have been to the games at CCAC South, when they're lacking on offense, it's very, very tough. And there's a lot of lulls in women's basketball, and often that team that has the last run, such as Point Park against Asbury in that tournament final, gets the win. So Point Park just needs to regularly put the ball in the basket. It sounds easy, but it's easier said than done.
Right, absolutely, exactly right with that one, Zach. Now, in the context of the program and the accomplishment of getting back to the national tournament, what would a win in the first round, and you get to the round of 16, and of course it's not just about Indiana Wesleyan. Here we are breaking down that matchup in depth, but and maybe they can look beyond if they're able to win there on Thursday night. But a win or two, what would that do for the program, and just kind of elevating it where they want to be among the NAIA's best?
I think a win would be absolutely huge. I mean, as I touched on earlier, this team seemed very unfamiliar in all aspects of the tournament last year, and that was unfortunate. And you could probably tell in the last minute the way they handled the game. As much as you like to say, hey, it's just another game, this is the KIAC, not the KIAC, but the NAIA tournament, and one loss and you're gone. You have nothing to support you. Your ranking doesn't support you. It's the end of the season with a loss, and you don't want to do that for all the seniors on this team, the April Austins, the Emily Shartners, the Maura McCaslins, the Brittany Dunmeyers, the Maeve Gallaghers. You don't want this to be their last game, and that's definitely what they're going to be saying. But you look at it, one game and you're done, and this would be huge to get this win against Indiana Wesleyan, and perhaps in the 3-6 matchup, whoever their opponent is getting that win. I mean, that would force the Raiders, who have really denied Point Park all season. Maybe we need to take a look at this team. Maybe this team is a force to be reckoned with, and they do deserve that ranking. And they deserved it last year. They deserved it this year. It's unfortunate that it hasn't happened, but a win, 2 wins, 1 win at a time, obviously, but that raises their profile. It makes them tougher. It gives them more respect, and hopefully it gives them a ranking.
Now, what you know of NAIA D2 basketball from what you've covered, the Point Park team, the starting 5, or their product and their players, how would you compare that? Is it something on par with anybody? Can they play it with anybody in this tournament? I mean, I look at a team that has 2 Division I transfers in the backcourt, a impact transfer in Jania McFadder down below, who's has got to be one of the best athletes out there in that 32-team tournament, and then throw in there 2 of probably some of the best defenders around, Teresa Davis and Katrisa Savitsky. Of course, it's April Austin and Emily Shartner, the 2 D1 transfers in the backcourt that we were mentioning. But with all that, I mean, that seems like a good recipe, and maybe even something more than what most 8th seeds have, would you say?
I really think that when Indiana Wesleyan saw that Point Park was an 8, I think that there was a chance that they were groaning, because I think they know there is a little bit of familiarity between the 2 schools, and I think they were a little bit concerned, because I do feel that the rankings don't matter. The facts are the facts, and Point Park can compete with any single team on any given day in any matchup, home, away, neutral surface. I really feel that way. This team's very competitive. This team can put together runs. The defense can frustrate any opponent, and anytime your defense can frustrate an opponent, it can create some easy baskets. Easy baskets, momentum. Momentum on offense and defense, and you have an advantage, and you're talking. If you add the crowd noise if at home, if you're talking, Coach Grenick, who I feel is already in just his 2nd year at Point Park, one of the most respected coaches already with what he's done with this program, bringing it from a 500-level program, which was a great accomplishment to begin with, to now an NAIA tournament threat every single time. It's a great accomplishment, and this team is to be feared and can compete with any team.
And now that's Thursday night, March 7th, 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. It's number 8 Point Park, 25-6 versus number 1 seed Indiana Wesleyan, 30-3, the number 4 overall team in the tournament and the country. Make sure you check that out. And like you mentioned, Zach, you know, I don't know what kind of crowd IWU might bring to the Tyson Events Center, but it's a marquee game. It's a night game, and you know, if Point Park can be in it at the end, you know, like always or sometimes happens, the neutral crowd will root for the underdog. So maybe Point Park will benefit in that way. With, of course, it's Indiana Wesleyan, a team that won the national title in 06-07 and reached the Final 8 each of the last 2 years. But now enough on Indiana Wesleyan. Let's take a look at around that little 8-team pod. It's 32 teams, 4 8-team brackets. The Point Park Indiana Wesleyan winner will get the winner of number 4 Purdue Calumet, or number 5 Grandview, Iowa. Zach, take us through maybe that matchup. And I know College of Ozarks is the 2 seed, another team that would certainly be reckoned with in that bracket.
Absolutely. You're looking at Purdue Calumet, and they actually faced a mutual opponent to Point Park. They faced Indiana University Southeast, and that was a tie score at the half. Purdue came away with the win 83-73, not to be taken away, but the fact that a team such as IU Southeast, as we touched on, can these teams in the KIAC play with other teams? You just saw for 20 minutes that IU Southeast was the 4-time reigning KIAC tournament champions before Point Park dethroned them. They hung in with them, and they lost by 10 in the semis, but that was early in the season when IU Southeast was also struggling, which also speaks to the power of the KIAC. You have, as I mentioned earlier, 4 or 5 teams in the KIAC I feel really could compete with almost any team in any of these other conferences. You look at them, they're 3rd in scoring, so they're very similar to an Asbury in that they're averaging 83.9 points per game. They're 4th in rebounds, they average over 45 a game. They're 6th in free throw percentage at 74.9, so you don't want to put them on the line. They have a couple scorers who average 16.5 a game. You have Amanda Gaskin, who has 10.2 rebounds a game, so you have the threats there and the numbers are there. Grandview, they do it on defense. It's a classic offense-defense matchup. You have Grandview 4th in blocks a game, 5th in total defense, defensive rebounds and field goal percentage on defense, holding opponents to 33.4% from the field. You have a scorer who has 15.2 points per game and 7.1 rebounds in Morgan Hamner. So that's going to be a classic offense-defense matchup, and it's going to be what works more. Is it going to be the offense or the defense? Very similar to Point Park Asbury, where Asbury was the offense with Trinia Barbie, and you had Laura Carroll, and then you had Point Park with 4 scorers that averaged double figures in classic defense, and you saw Point Park take that series 2-1. So it really could go either way there, and either opponent I think Point Park could very well match up with, should they knock on wood defeat Indy Wesleyan. Then you mentioned Ozarks. Obviously, they had a good background. If I remember correctly, they made the finals last year.
They're always a tournament regular, and they do bring a big following to Sioux City every year.
Absolutely. So you have the 3rd leading scorer in the entire NAIA behind 2 KIAC scorers in Alice Lloyd with Ariel Nickel and Trinia Barbie from Asbury. You have Morgan Smith, who averages 24.1 points per game and 18.2 rebounds a game, is absolutely huge. She could cause a lot of matchup problems. She's a senior as well, I believe, so she's really going to want it. I believe they're 1st in assisted turnover margin and rebounds, so that's also huge. So they're a very tough team, and they outscored their opponents the whole season by 492 points. So it shows that a lot of these games were not close fought. They just absolutely owned it, led by Morgan Smith. So that could cause huge matchup problems down the road. But Point Park said it all season. It's the classic take one game at a time. Take care of business against Indy Wesleyan, and then you match up with the winner of 4-5. And if you get to that point, then anything can happen. Point Park could be in the driver's seat, having just dethroned a #1 team, but they can't take any single game off. They really can't, because every game is a championship game for them at this point.
That's exactly right, and the first test, of course, they got to get by is IWU, the #1 seed, and that's a good breakdown, Zach, of possible second-round opponents. #4, Purdue Calumet, or #5, Grandview, Iowa. That second-round game that Point Park would feed into with a win would be Friday night at about 8:45 p.m. Central Time. And if they're fortunate enough to get to Saturday, you're probably looking at a #2 seed, College of the Ozarks, top 5 team nationally. Zach, the tournament runs March 6th through 12th, and if you're the winner, you got to win 5 games in 7 days. Round of 8 on Saturday, they take off Sunday. Semifinals on Monday night, championship game on Tuesday. Zach, given the Point Park team and a little bit of a short bench here for a lot of the season, how are they equipped with handling that type of grind if they find themselves fortunate enough to advance, playing day after day?
It's really mind over matter, and I think that they've been experienced with playing so many games over so many days. I mean, the first 6 games of the season they had to play over the course of, I believe, a couple of weeks period. So they were tested in that regard. They ended their season with 5 games in 8 days. So they definitely are familiar with the fatigue factor, and there are going to be some tired legs, I'm sure, especially given how hard and how well they move defensively. But they're just going to have to, as Coach Grenick, his favorite saying, suck it up. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And this tournament will be a marathon, and they're very familiar with that, and they're very well coached. And I think that they'll be able to save those legs. They'll take the practices smartly, but they'll also take them prepared, much like a student kind of with the final exam, because every game is a test, and every test is a final exam in this tournament. something I'm sure a lot of people out there can relate to. So Point Park just has to take care of business one game at a time, and it starts with 40 minutes, if not more, on Thursday.
Now, Zach, would you be as bold to offer a prediction, whether it's the Indiana Wesleyan game or the tournament as a whole? What's your thoughts on how the Pioneers might do?
I really think it's one thing that we've not talked about yet is the free throws. And Point Park has had their struggles lately from the free throw line. They make them when they matter, and I think it will come down to free throws on Thursday. And as I just said, Point Park nails them when they need to. I do think that I will take the upset on Thursday, 64-59. Point Park defeats Indy Wesleyan, and it comes down to free throws. Emily Shartner nails 3 big ones at the line. I don't know, this is my crystal ball, I guess. Yeah. I'm going to say that I'm going to take Calumet. I really think that Purdue Calumet will win that game. It'll set up a classic offense defense, and Point Park, it'll treat it like it's Asbury. I think that's how they'll treat it. They beat them too, and then I think they do fall to Ozarks. But
the bracket does look sort of favorable. Of course, they'd have to get through Indiana Wesleyan would be the big first test, and it would be an upset that the whole tournament, I think, would be talking about. It's the 15th of 16 first-round games. It takes 2 days to play the first round. Zach, thank you so much for being as bold to make your prediction, and thank you for your analysis here and breaking down the Point Park Pioneers and the NAIA Division II National Championship Tournament on our preview show. You can see this on our YouTube channel later today. Pioneers versus #1 seed Indiana Wesleyan, Thursday night, March 7th, 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern. The NAIA will have live video, pay-per-view, $9.95 per day. You can see 8 games the first 2 days, or $29.95 for the entire tournament. Of course, the guys from WPPJ will be out there providing live audio, free of charge, msasports.net, and there will be live stats courtesy of NAIA and DAC Stats. Zach, I want to thank you once again for coming in. Zach, you can find him on Twitter, Zachary M. Weiss, and he writes for the Globe. You can read him in there, campus newspaper, Pittsburgh Sports Report, Pittsburgh Sporting News, and he co-hosts his show with Andrew Goldstein, A to Z Sports, every Wednesday on WPPJradio.com. Make sure you check that out. Zach, any final thoughts before we send it off here?
Just a little, if the ladies are listening, just 40 minutes every day, one possession at a time. Be smart. You guys know that you're going to beat the #1 seed. Just be the team that you guys know that you are, and you've got it. Thanks for having me on, Kevin, in other words, too.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much. That'll do it for the NAIA Division II Women's Basketball National Tournament preview show from Point Park University Athletics YouTube. Tune into those games, and we'll see you later.